Well, hello and welcome. I'm Peggy, and thank you so much for joining us today. And I have had more fun just visiting with the person sitting here with me before we went on the air. And it is just a joy to introduce to you Kimberly Sims. And she is an author and a poet. She is a graduate of Furman University with a master's degree from Clemson University. And you teach, or you have been teaching, and you've lived in England. You've done so much already, I don't know where to begin. But you have, is this your first book?
It is. Lindy Lee, Songs on Mill Hill. It's my first debut collection of poetry. It officially comes out in October. And I'm really excited because it's all about the local history of the upstate of South Carolina.
So it's called Songs of Mill Hill. And it's about South Carolina.
Yes, ma'am, and all about...
Because this is your home.
It is, it is. I grew up here. My family's here. My husband's family all worked in textile mills. And so I have a big connection to that community, and I wanted to really shine a light on a lot of the forgotten history because so many people work for the textile mills, and when you look around our communities, you see the water towers and you see the old textile mill buildings.
And a lot of that history is dying off.
Absolutely, absolutely. And I think that it's really important to kind of talk about it and, you know, help people remember the way that it was like in the 20s and 30s, because there was a lot of hard times for people that worked in the textile industry. It got really a lot better in the 50s. But what I was amazed by is the strength of the communities. I think that was what really held people together when they were going through, you know, working for low wages or no wages, not having access to education. But the communities were so strong back then that allowed them to work together to overcome the many obstacles that they faced. And I think that's something today that we can learn from.
Absolutely. So this is your first endeavor, so to speak.
Yes, it is. And I started it when I was doing my master's at Clemson University.
Okay.
And I ended up writing a poem based on a photograph, and then I started remembering stories I had heard at different family gatherings about working in the textile mills, and I started doing some research and watching interviews online because there's a lot of great history that's been recorded, and I just became obsessed. It was like a rabbit hole. The more that I researched, the more interested I became.
But see, Kimberly, this is the thing. If we don't have people like you to write it down and save it, those times will fade away and there won't be anybody left to remember what it was like.
Absolutely, absolutely. And that's what I wanted to do in the poems is the poems are all told, it's by a fictional character, but what I did is I took all the stories that I saw repeated in town after town and kind of brought all those stories together into one fictional character. And so while it is a book of poetry, there actually is a story arc in the poem, and then it focuses kind of on one community and family, and different poems are told from different family members' point of view. And it kind of goes from when Lindy Lee is a teenager all the way through she's grown with her own children.
And what year would when would this have taken place?
The very first, and actually I could read the first poem in the book.
Before the Second World War? Or?
The first poem is in 1914, but most are set in the 1920s and 1930s.
Okay, right before the Second World War.
Absolutely,
then.
Yep, right before the Second World War. And I thought that time was interesting because there's really not very many people from that time. Maybe people that were children then. So that history really has slipped away. And that was a time, a lot of people don't realize that most of the people working in the textile mills never even were paid. They lived in a house and they got some supply.
You mean they didn't work for a wage?
Yeah, they did not get a wage. Now, it was said that they were getting a wage, but at the end of every week, they would get a paycheck that said 0 on it. So to me, if you go to work every day and you never actually get paid any money, that's not really working for a wage.
How could this happen?
Well, at that time, the textile mills, cotton was king.
Yeah.
You know, and so basically, it was just a really different time, and workers did not have any rights like they do today. And that was what's interesting to me is that during that time, workers had so little rights. And there was kind of like a lot of fighting and struggling through the 20s and 30s to get rights that people have today. But unfortunately, some of the rights that workers do have today are slipping away. And another thing I wanted to do with the book was to kind of raise awareness about workers' rights, particularly temp workers and temporary workers that we have today, because some of them are starting to also fall into very low-wage traps and have a lot of difficulties in today's society. So I think that sometimes by looking at the past, it can make us kind of think about and evaluate what's happening today in the present.
Now, what connection do you have with a Carl Sandburg house or home?
Well, thank you. The Carl Sandburg house is in Flat Rock, North Carolina.
Up in Flat Rock, and if you haven't been,
it's beautiful.
It is a joy to visit.
It is beautiful.
And it kind of, you could make a mini holiday out of it.
Oh, yeah. They have all these goats up there, and you can tour the house, and you can go on a hike. In 2016, I was their writer in residence. So it was really fabulous. I had an office actually in the Carl Sandburg house. If you go up into the White House, there's kind of a crow's nest in the top where Carl Sandburg himself had a desk where he used to write, and they put me a desk in the exact spot where he had a desk, and I could sit in there and write my poetry and look out at the beautiful Blue Ridge Mountains. I also enjoyed visiting with their many goats. Right when I arrived at the Carl Sandburg house, the ranger I was meeting with got a call that a new goat had been born. And so within 20 minutes of me showing up at the Carl Sandburg house, I was holding this baby goat in my arms. It was just so much fun. There's beautiful hiking trails up there, and then a lot of history, too. You can learn about the genetic history of breeding the different dairy goats. And then they have a lot of relics and just the way that people lived, 50, 60 years ago. So
it's a history lesson.
Oh, absolutely. But
it's a fun place to go as a whole, as a family, and take your children.
I take my kids up there all the time. I only live about 15 minutes away, so I take my daughter and just family members, and we go and walk the property or have a picnic or play with the goats. It's a great day trip. It's a lot of fun.
And we have a wealth of natural beauty and interesting and historic places. You don't have to go far to find something.
Absolutely. I think you could probably from here, be up there in 30 minutes. It's not far at all.
Yeah.
One thing that was really fun when I was at the Carl Sandburg house, some of my students that I taught when I was a teacher at Northwest Middle School came up and visited me. So it was really fun. I had retired from teaching to pursue my dream as a writer, and I had gotten this opportunity to be the writer in residence at the Carl Sandburg house. So it was really fun to have my former students come and see me in kind of that new role.
Well, now, do you teach now?
I do.
Tell us about what you're doing.
Well, I'm not a full-time teacher anymore, but I do work for the Metropolitan Arts Council, which is just a fabulous organization in Greenville. And they send about 30 teaching artists into 40 different schools. So I go into elementary and middle schools. And basically, I work with kids to help them write poetry and to do creative writing and to do drama, but all tied to the curriculum. So basically, the kids are learning the standards for English and social studies through creative writing and drama.
Now, what age group are you aiming for?
I have done everything from kindergarten up through 8th grade.
Oh, my goodness.
So earlier this week, I was working with 3rd graders. We were studying the causes of the American Revolution through drama strategies. And so we were just acting stuff out and having a blast. And the kids were learning about Samuel Adams and the Boston Tea Party. And they were really remembering it because of the way that they're able to engage and move around and be active participants in the learning.
I'll bet you're a fabulous teacher.
Oh, well, thank you. It's a lot of fun.
Because your enthusiasm shows through. And if you can get kids involved.
Yes.
People say, oh, history's boring.
Yes.
You always hear history. But it isn't. It's exciting.
It
all depends on the way you present it to kids.
Absolutely. And I have a book of history poetry. I teach history using poetry and creative writing. So I'm very passionate about history. So I hope that my excitement and interest in history comes across when I work with kids to get them excited about it too. Because history, we need to know what happened in the past so that we can understand the future.
Yes. and know how to judge where we are right now.
Absolutely.
Maybe we can avoid some drastic mistakes if we look at history, right?
Absolutely. I think you're totally right. And just to reflect, too, on what has happened, to reflect on what has come before us and what is going to come in the future.
Now, this is your first endeavor.
Yes.
This is your book.
And I was very excited because I began working on this while I was doing my master's degree at Clemson University. And I started writing the poems, but then I kind of took a break and I started a family and had my daughter, who's now 8. And then as she's a little bit more independent now, I came back to this project about a year and a half ago, 2 years ago, and finished the book. And I sent it to a publisher, and I ended up only sending it to one place, which is, I was just very lucky, and they accepted it for publication. So I was just like over the moon.
Of course. And this on the front, the cover, what is that? Is it significant?
Yeah, it is. So this is actually a block print that I did. I went to visit the Newry Mill in Clemson, South Carolina. There's a beautiful mill there, and I had taken some photographs and had just taken a block printing class. And so I made this picture and actually stamped it myself and then scanned that, and that became the cover of the book. Which I wanted it to be kind of a handmade feel, because I think the textile industry was all about the different fabrics and the textiles and everything. So I wanted to have a kind of a handmade feel to the book cover as well.
Do you think we are losing some of this in the modernization of everything, that what made the textile industry in the South so outstanding?
I think you're right. I think that was a time when people could get up and go to work every day and be proud of what they did. I don't know if a lot of people don't realize that when Neil Armstrong walked on the moon, he was wearing cloth that was made in South Carolina.
Well, most of us didn't know.
The actual fabric that he was wearing was made in Marietta at a mill. And so we don't realize all the little tiny details where textiles and fabrics, and even today, the textiles that are made in South Carolina are very, very high tech, and they go into space, and they keep our troops safe, and they do so many important and amazing things. And I think it was a great opportunity for local workers to really be proud of what they did.
Absolutely.
I actually have a poem about the walk on the moon and the fabric being made in South Carolina. I could read it if that would be.
Is it a long poem?
It's a very short poem, actually.
All right. You read your poem, and then we'll go to a break.
Okay.
Let's hear this. What's the title?
This is called We Walk on the Moon, and it's set in
We Walk on the Moon.
We Walk on the Moon. The air hung electric on our stooped shoulders. Jerome picked mandolin over foreign TV voices. We all counted down, held our breath, sighed it out, a collective heave. Neil Armstrong walking with our fingerprints on his Teflon-coated thread suit. Standing shoulder to shoulder on the porch, mesmerized by the RCA heralder, we melded together into Teflon, with dusty regolith below our feet, our heads light with triumph. The cold moon air brushed against us, sending stars across our arms. Cotton cartwheeled over swimming oceans. A million pinpricks in dark fabric swallowed us and our lifetime of long textile shifts, transforming our work-worn hands into things that mattered as we stood on the moon in the earth's shifting brightness.
Thank you. We'll be right back.